This happened to me when I was 10 years old. I was living in a market town in mid-Wales when this occurred. To give a bit of backstory, I had been living in mid-Wales since 2001, but I moved back to England in 2011. So 10 years was how long I lived there. This market town was between Welshpool and Barmouth. I was with the cadets in Wales, and in 2007, there was a trip in Portsmouth, which is the only island city in the United Kingdom. I was at an encampment, which was around 20 miles from Portsmouth, where I, along with the other cadets, were put in dorms. There were about 10 of us in these 2-story buildings. My bed was a camp bed, with a little metal cabinet and a small but very old side table. And then there was the other 2 cadets either side of me. I did the usual exercises you do as an Army Cadet. For example, we did a full 2-hour march and stand at attention exercise, while afterwards we grabbed our lunch from this very small and run-down hut, which was mostly always overcrowded, and you were only allowed to eat around the area of the hut. This annoyed me because I preferred to keep to myself, especially when I ate. Now here is where things got strange. I was out in the woods with some cadets, and our assigned drill sergeant was with us. We were told to learn about cover and hide, which is sort of the equivalent of being taught how to set up an ambush, where you either hide or find appropriate cover. I was briefly lost after everyone split up. I found cover, and while I was in hiding, I heard twigs snapping around me. I thought that it was one of the other cadets on my team, or maybe the opponents we were to ambush. When I looked up, slowly, trying not to be heard, I didn't see anyone at all. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was some animal. We were in a very rural area, so wildlife was common. Even so, I began to hear the footsteps drawing closer to my position, yet no one was there every time I checked. This was early afternoon with the sun high in the sky. I had clear visibility, but I could not ascertain where the footsteps were coming from. I was beginning to freak out, and made as best as I could a stealth run back to where the place of meeting was, only to ruin the activity for everyone. The other cadets were of course annoyed at me. I told the assigned drill sergeant about what happened, but he seemed annoyed at me too, and said that it was just my imagination. Maybe he was right. A 10-year-old could have an overactive imagination. We were then told we were setting up camp for the night, and unlike my usual self, I was a bit more comfortable then knowing people were around. Having been so creeped out, I didn't want to be alone. I was told who I would be camping with. They were these 2 boys in other cadet units. That night, we were being given a lesson on the way the Army sets up camps in the woods when they're in the middle of a battlefield, and for recon too. I happened to glance off into the distance during this. The forest, including the grass under it, was quite clear under the dim moonlight. It was beautiful, like something from a painting. I wasn't paying attention to the seminar, hardly listening to what the lieutenant was saying. That was when I saw the outline of a shadowy figure walking across the grass from one side of the forest to the other side. I thought it was probably a reflection of the trees and the moon, but as I focused, it was very clearly the silhouette of a man. He looked towards me, and in a kind of in-the-mind voice, I heard it. "When you die, you'll burn in hell." I was trembling and scared. Then one of the sergeants looked at me and saw me freaking out. She came over and asked me if I was okay. Now, I was quite a sensitive child, and I got upset very easily. Out of the sight of the other cadets, I was in the back of a parked minibus, weeping my eyes out. I was overcome with emotion and fear. I was able to sit out the lessons and speak to my dad. He told me I was being overreactive and to calm down, but I couldn't. I then told him I wanted to go home, but I had missed my chance to when another friend of mine went home with his mom 2 days prior into the 11-day stay. 2 days after this, there was a party going on in the hall of the complex. I was there for a couple of hours, as it was not really a disco party with a DJ and a bar. Just a drink stand and a CD player hooked up to speakers, playing the recent albums that had come out here. I was heading back alone to the dorms. My dorm was on the other side of the complex, and I knew I had quite the walk ahead of me. As I headed back towards my dorm, I saw a woman in a cadet uniform looking away from me, near the girls-only dorms. I asked her if she was all right, or if she was lost, to which she replied in an echoey voice,
"You shouldn't be here."
And then I saw it. The bottom half of her body was transparent. I freaked out, making a mad run back to the door, pounding at it, slapping my hands against the windows until another cadet who I spoke to let me in. I went straight to the dorm that I was staying in, and I did not leave for the rest of the night, nor did I sleep a wink. It was the 10th day in and the final night before I could go back to Mid-Wales. I was so relieved and decided to make this day count as it was my last day. That day was fairly relaxed. It consisted of a reward ceremony and a rafting trip, including canoeing and rock climbing. The day flew by, and it was almost night. I went back to my dorm feeling happy. It was the last night, so one of the rooms on the other end of the building from our dorm decided they would host a Ouija board session. They invited me along, which I kindly declined and went to sleep. Over 2 hours later, after falling asleep, I woke up to a noise of footsteps on the wooden floor and the sound of tapping on the walls, which I thought was the other dorm being in a wind-up mood, as they had shockingly shared a spliff amongst each other, although they were between 12 and 14 at the time. I guess it wasn't really a surprise. I got up to check outside the door only to see the door closed. I lowered my head and tried to go back to sleep. Another 30 minutes later, the noises started up again. Only this time it was in the dorm that I was sleeping in. I thought that it was one of the cadets, but apart from me and 2 other cadets who were asleep, the beds were vacant, and no one was moving around. I went back to sleep again, and once more not long after that, the room grew cold. I mean freezing cold, and I woke up. I was beginning to feel scared. I had to remind myself that the windows were locked and could only be opened with a key. I looked up at the door after feeling like my legs were frozen, and I saw it. Somehow someone was in the room. In the right corner of the ajar door was the upper half of a man looking in on us, with nothing but the shape of his upper torso and his head. He looked at me, and I whispered over to the other cadet next to me to see if he saw him too. But like the other ones before, he ignored me, saying that I was just seeing things. I couldn't help but think that the other dorm messing with that Ouija board may have made things worse. The entity just stared in at me and then vanished into the darkness. I did not sleep for the rest of the night after that, and finally I knew it was time to go home. All the cadets said goodbye to one another, including a few who tried to photograph me, but I hated having my picture taken. So when it was all said and done, the coach left Portsmouth, and I went back home. Looking back at those 11 days in that encampment, I can only think of one thing from that time. Why was I told that I would burn in hell? What was the meaning behind those occurrences? Why was I the only one who saw and heard everything that happened? Maybe they knew it was haunted and wanted to keep it hidden, or maybe I was the chosen participant in these spirits' game. Nothing has happened since, but those 11 days were the days that hell came to me.